You stand in the ruins of a city that once ruled the world. The stones are cracked, the air is still, and the only sound is the wind dragging sand across broken walls. No voices, no songs, no markets buzzing with life. Just dust and silence. For thousands of years, mighty civilizations rose from dust and returned to dust. From the deserts of Mesopotamia to the jungles of Central America, they left behind towering monuments and haunting mysteries. They wrote their names into stone, swore their empires would last forever, and told themselves they had conquered the earth. And yet, here you are, walking through the bones of their dreams. Why did they fall? Why does every golden age fade into shadow? You could blame kings, or armies, or greed, and you'd be partly right. But there's another force, quieter, older, and far less forgiving. Climate. The heat, the cold, the rain that doesn't come, the rivers that do not rise. Nature does not negotiate. It simply watches and waits and takes everything back when the time is right. You might think of climate as background noise, the weather app you check while sipping coffee. For ancient civilizations, it was everything. A good flood meant full bellies and stable governments. A bad harvest meant riots, collapse, and maybe your head rolling in the dirt. Your leaders could build temples, armies, pyramids, and empires, but they could not command the sky. And here's the bitter truth. Civilizations don't usually collapse because people get tired of them. They collapse because the earth shifts beneath them, sometimes slowly, like a drying river, sometimes suddenly, like a storm that never ends. Imagine spending generations carving out order from chaos, only for a few bad decades of drought to send it all tumbling down. All the writing, all the monuments, all the gods, powerless against an empty grain store. Forget the Hollywood version of history, where great empires fall with trumpets and flames. The real version is quieter, hungrier, more desperate. It looks like mothers burying their children because the harvest failed again. It looks like cities abandoned because the wells went dry. It looks like ordinary people, you, packing up your life and walking away, leaving behind the very walls your ancestors built. This story is not about kings and conquests. Not really. It's about the thin line between survival and starvation, about how climate shaped not just the land but the minds of those who lived on it. You don't invent writing because you're bored, you invent it because you need to count grain before someone steals it. You don't worship a river because it's beautiful, you worship it because if it doesn't flood on time, you die. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, from the Indus Valley to the Maya, and finally to mighty Rome, civilizations rose when the climate was kind, and cracked when it was not. Their ruins tell us stories of brilliance, power, and ambition. But their silences tell us something else, that no matter how strong we think we are still creatures of the earth. And the earth has moods. So, dim the lights. Get comfortable. Maybe pour yourself a drink, water, wine, whatever gets you through the night. We're about to wander through the first great civilizations to see how climate gave them life and how it slowly, cruelly took it back. Spoiler alert, it doesn't end well. You step out of the ruins into the pale light of morning, or what passes for morning after centuries of dust. The wind carries the faint smell of earth, dry and cracked, and you realize it has not changed much in millennia. The same sun that baked the bricks of you now warms your shoulders. The same rain that once nourished the Nile's banks now falls where no one notices. Civilizations may rise and fall, but climate persists. And it will not forgive. In the next hours, or perhaps minutes if you allow yourself to drift, you will trace the paths of the first great human societies. Not as an observer, but as someone who feels the ground beneath their feet, hears the rivers they depended on, and smells the smoke of their kitchens and fires. You will see how human ingenuity intertwined with the natural world, how rivers could be gods, and drought could be executioner. We begin with Mesopotamia, the land between rivers, cradle of the first cities. Here, in the Fertile Crescent, humans discovered that if you could control the flow of water, you could control life itself. You'll walk along the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates, noticing how the mud bricks of ziggurats glisten after the floodwaters recede, and you'll wonder, how could anyone imagine eternity in a place so fragile? Then you will move south along the winding Nile to the Empire of Egypt. Here, the river dictated rhythm, inundation, planting, harvest. Pharaohs claimed divine favor, but it was really the Nile that fed the people. You'll feel the oppressive heat of the deserts on either side, the scent of papyrus in the sun-baked air, and understand why the Egyptians worshipped order above all else. For without it, their gardens would wither, and so would their lives. Further east, the Indus Valley emerges, a civilization of surprising sophistication. Straight streets, well-planned cities, advanced drainage. A modern mind would envy the order. And yet, we know so little about them. Their script remains a mystery, their gods silent. But the rivers, the Indus and its tributaries, tell us everything. The climate shaped their rhythm, and when the monsoons shifted or the rivers dried, the cities slowly emptied, leaving behind stone and dust as witness. And then there's the Maya, deep in Central America, where jungles reclaim stone temples as fast as humans build them. You'll feel the damp heat, hear the incessant buzz of insects, and see stars mapped across temple walls. Here, climate dictated the rise and fall of kings and cities alike. Droughts could topple dynasties, yet for centuries, they mastered calendars, astronomy, and agriculture. They were brilliant and fragile. Finally, you arrive at Rome. Not the romanticized version with marble columns and triumphant legions, but a living, breathing empire built atop rivers, hills, and a climate that could be both generous and cruel. Roads, aqueducts, farms, all dependent on rainfall, soil, and temperature. Overextension, corruption, invasions, and occasionally, the simple cruelty of a bad season. Rome teaches us that even the mightiest empire bends to the whims of the earth. Across these civilizations, one lesson whispers in the ruins. Humans are clever, ambitious, and bold, but always at the mercy of their environment. Climate was never a background actor. It shaped crops, cities, armies, and empires. It dictated where people could live, what they could eat, and how long they might thrive. And when it turned, slow or sudden, it wrote the final chapter. So, as we move through Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, you might wonder why anyone should care about civilizations that fell thousands of years ago. After all, they're gone. Their kings are dust, their markets silent, their temples nothing more than stones poking through the earth. But that's precisely why you should care. Because those stones, those ruins, those silent rivers, they are the fingerprints of forces that still shape our world. And if you listen closely, they have a story to tell. Civilizations are not just monuments and artifacts. They are experiments in organizing life. They are humanity's first attempts at saying, we will bend nature to our will, and in doing so, we will build something that lasts forever. And yet, every one of them failed. Single. Not because people weren't clever or ambitious or terrifyingly good at bureaucracy, but because they forgot the one thing that really runs the show, climate. You might think, sure, floods happen, droughts happen, but we have technology, air conditioning, irrigation systems. We're safe. That is, of course, what every ruler, every architect, every farmer thought before their world began to crumble. The lesson is simple and terrifying. Cleverness only carries you so far. Rivers rise and fall. Rains come and go. The sun does not negotiate. And when climate turns, it will do so on its own timetable, indifferent to your plans. So why study Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, the Maya, and Rome? Because they are mirrors. Look closely, and you'll see your own world reflected back. Cities built on the promise of abundance, populations swelling beyond what the land can sustain, systems of trade and agriculture so complex that a single failure could unravel everything. Climate is the quiet puppeteer, and you are holding the strings, if you are clever enough to notice. Take Mesopotamia, for example. People settled between rivers, inventing writing, law, and irrigation. They mastered agriculture, but even their brilliance could not overcome unpredictable floods or centuries-long droughts. The cradle of civilization is also its grave. You can almost hear the faint, mocking whisper of the Tigris and Euphrates. You may have built cities, but I am older than you. I do not bend. Egypt, on the other hand, flourished along the Nile. Every year, the river performed its ritual flooding, and the people celebrated life. Yet even the mighty Nile could not save Egypt forever. When climate shifted, when the rains faltered, when drought stretched across decades, the empire faltered. Pharaohs could issue decrees, build pyramids, and parade through cities, but they could not make rain fall on demand. Their monuments remain, but their civilization wavered like a reed in a storm. The Indus Valley shows another lesson. Cities meticulously planned, streets laid out in grids, drainage systems rivaling modern engineering, all of it vanished into mystery. Trade routes failed, rivers dried or changed course, and humans abandoned their homes. It was not war, not conquest, but the invisible hand of climate that emptied those streets. And yet, we call them lost cities, as if something human failed them, rather than the earth itself. The Maya were brilliant astronomers, mathematicians, and builders, yet climate betrayed them too. Drought after drought drained reservoirs, toppled harvests, and sparked internal conflict. Jungle swallowed stone temples as swiftly as ambition turned to dust. Rome, mighty Rome, had armies, roads, aqueducts, and a civilization that stretched across continents, yet even it bowed under environmental pressures, soil depletion, changing rainfall, and the simple weight of sustaining too many mouths. All of this matters because climate shapes more than land. It shapes life, power, and ambition. Every empire, no matter how grand, obeyed the same rules: grow, thrive, and collapse under environmental strain. You can see it in the ruins, in the empty fields, in the cracked walls of forgotten palaces. The same principles that dictated Mesopotamian harvests dictate modern food systems, water management, and earth. You wake up on a damp morning, the kind where the mud smells rich and alive, and the air clings to your skin. Your feet sink slightly into the soft riverbank soil as you step outside. Around you, the first cities of Mesopotamia rise slowly from the earth, their walls rough, sun-baked, but remarkably stubborn. You might think civilization is clean, orderly, and sophisticated, but here it is, mud and straw and human sweat mixed together in a smell you'll never forget. Mesopotamia, the land between rivers, is where humans first dared to say, "We will settle. We will grow food. We will make life more permanent than it naturally wants to be." The Tigris and Euphrates are your constants, your gods, your unpredictable landlords. When the rivers flood, they give life. When they fail, they take it away. You learn quickly that obedience to the rivers is not optional. Ignore them at your peril. Cities here are messy, crowded, and noisy. Mud brick walls tower over narrow streets. People bargain in markets, traders shout over each other, and children run barefoot, laughing and occasionally screaming because the floodwaters just washed away someone's carefully stacked grain. You notice the ziggurats reaching for the sky, ambitious towers of mud that aspire to touch the heavens. They're impressive, yes, but a single heavy rain can erode years of labor. Humility comes early here, whether you like it or not. Farming dominates life. Barley, wheat, lentils, You are constantly aware of what the climate demands. Too little rain, and the crops shrivel. Too much, and the fields turn into muddy traps. Irrigation canals snake across the land, impressive in design but fragile in practice. Maintaining them is a constant job, and someone always dies in the ditches or argues over water rights. You can invent cuneiform to keep records, but the rivers do not read. And let's talk about writing. It began as a method of counting grain, slaves, and taxes, not poetry, not philosophy. Imagine carving wedge-shaped marks into clay just to ensure your neighbor doesn't steal your barley. Practicality first, beauty optional. You realize quickly that civilization is, at its core, a system of constant negotiation with scarcity. Every tablet you make, every mark you press, is a small victory against the chaos of climate and human ambition. But life isn't just labor and mud. The people are vibrant, full of stories, prayers, and rituals designed to please both gods and rivers. Temples hum with incense, and priests dictate your relationship with the divine and, by extension, the climate. You can pray to Enlil or Inanna all you like, but even the gods cannot command the river. that remains stubbornly independent, indifferent, and occasionally catastrophic. Trade flourishes because Mesopotamia cannot survive alone. You barter grain for timber, stone, and metals. You see long-distance trade on the horizon, boats creaking down the rivers, caravans crossing deserts. Yet all of this wealth depends on the cooperation of elements far beyond human control. One failed harvest can topple markets, and you remember, empires rise on good years and fall on bad ones. Despite the chaos, there is brilliance here. Mathematics, law, literature. Yes, even the Epic of Gilgamesh will eventually appear, a story of ambition, friendship, mortality, and the relentless passage of time. And isn't that just the Mesopotamian way? To build, to measure, to write, all the while knowing the rivers, the weather, and time itself might undo your efforts in a single season. You realize, as you walk the narrow streets, that life here is not about comfort. There is no air conditioning, no modern plumbing, no safety net. You are at the mercy of rivers and rain, of droughts and sudden floods. Yet humans endure. They innovate. They write laws, build walls, and dream of permanence. Ambition thrives in chaos. And you, observer, wanderer, witness, start to understand why the first civilizations mattered. You wake up again, but this time it's not in awe of ziggurats or riverbanks. It's the reality of life itself. Civilization in Mesopotamia is not a romantic story. It's a grind, and you are in the thick of it. The streets are muddy, the air thick with smoke from cooking fires, and the clatter of carts and shouting merchants fills every corner. Welcome to the daily chaos, where climate shapes everything whether you notice it or not. Your first task is simple: water the crops. But simple is a relative term here. You trudge along irrigation canals, waist-deep in mud, carrying water in clay vessels that will inevitably crack. The Tigris has been low this season, which means the barley doesn't grow as fast, the harvest will be smaller, and your stomach tightens at the thought of empty granaries. A drought doesn't negotiate, it simply exists, and you adapt or die. After that, you check the livestock. Goats, sheep, and a few oxen provide food, milk, and labor. Their survival depends entirely on the rain that never falls on schedule. You've learned to count days, not in weeks or months, but in the shadow of the sun and the moisture in the soil. A failed season means starvation, social unrest, or both. And you've already memorized the grim proverb your elders whisper: "The river gives, the river takes, and no god interferes twice." Food is precious. Bread is the staple, coarse and heavy, made from barley that somehow survived the river's whims. You eat standing over a fire, inhaling smoke that stings your eyes and throat. Water is drawn from the canals, muddy and warm, but better than nothing. There is no refrigeration, no abundance. Every meal is a negotiation with climate, a reminder that your civilization may be brilliant, but it is precarious. Trade is your other lifeline. You barter barley for wood, reeds, or imported stone. Every deal depends on stability in places you've never seen. A drought upriver could empty markets before your goods even reach the city. And if a flood washes out the canals, all bets are off. You learn to gamble constantly, aware that your survival hangs on patterns you do not control. Religion weaves through your life, not as comfort, but as survival strategy. You visit the temple to offer sacrifices to Enlil or Inanna, not because you truly believe they control the rivers, but because it gives people a sense of order, and order is survival. You watch priests record offerings on clay tablets, maintaining a bureaucracy that balances human ambition against climate's indifference. It's a thin shield, but better than none. Even leisure is dictated by the environment. Festivals coincide with floods or harvests. Music, dance, and storytelling flourish in bursts between labor, never in abundance. You might hear the faint sound of a lyre or see a performance in the shadow of a ziggurat, but it is fleeting, ephemeral, and always overshadowed by the practical realities of survival. Civilization, it seems, allows little space for frivolity when every day is a contest with the elements. Conflict is never far away. Water disputes, failed harvests, and the envy of neighbors spark arguments, sometimes violence. You learn early that cooperation is necessary, but fragile. The rivers dictate your life, but so do the people around you, and they are just as unpredictable. Climate may be relentless, but humans can be equally unforgiving. By the end of the day, your body aches from labor, your mind worries about the harvest, and your heart is quietly terrified by the uncertainty that looms in the sky above. Yet there is pride here too. Every clay brick you lay, every canal you maintain, every grain you count and record, is a small triumph over chaos. Civilization is messy, exhausting, and often unfair, but it is yours, and somehow, that is enough to keep you going. As night falls, the city settles into uneasy quiet. You hear distant howls from wild animals driven closer by shrinking wetlands, the soft murmur of neighbors preparing for another day of toil, and the river's low, constant murmur, a reminder that climate, like time, is always moving, always watching. You lie down on a mat in your small, earthen home, exhausted but alive. You step out into the heat of the Egyptian morning, and immediately the air hits you like a wall of warmth. Sand stretches in every direction, pale and unforgiving, and the Nile snakes lazily through it all, a ribbon of life in a land that would otherwise be relentless. Civilization here, you quickly realize, is not built on ambition alone. It is built on the river. Without it, the pyramids would be just mounds of stone, and the temples would be abandoned piles of dust. Egypt rises along the Nile, and the river is both generous and tyrannical. Every year, it floods predictably, most of the time, depositing silt that turns barren deserts into fertile fields. Miss the flood, and the harvest fails. Too much flood, and villages are swept away. The Nile does not negotiate. Pharaohs may claim divinity, priests may chant incantations, but in truth, power here is nothing without water. You learn humility quickly in a place where survival depends entirely on the whims of a river. Life in Egypt revolves around cycles. Planting, tending, harvesting, all dictated by the ebb and flow of the Nile. Farmers wake before dawn, sandals coated in mud, to guide oxen and plow the fields. Irrigation channels snake through the land like veins, intricate and essential. You realize that maintaining these canals is as much a political act as it is a practical one. Control the water, and you control life. Fail, and famine follows, quietly, methodically, with no mercy. Temples dominate the horizon, rising above mud brick homes like silent overseers. Pharaohs demand tribute, labor, and loyalty, but even they bow to the river's rhythm. You may marvel at the precision of the pyramids or the vast tombs of kings, but the real marvel is that people manage to carve order from a desert shaped by sun, sand, and water. And yet, behind every monumental stone lies the sweat, blood, and exhaustion of ordinary citizens, like you, who make civilization possible day after merciless day. Trade flows along the Nile as reliably as the river itself, though it is never guaranteed. Boats laden with grain, papyrus, gold, and luxury goods ply the waters, connecting Upper and Lower Egypt. Floods, droughts, or sudden changes in weather can ruin shipments. Civilization, you begin to notice, is nothing more than a complex game of anticipation, patience, and perpetual anxiety about what nature might do next. Religion is inescapable, as it was in Mesopotamia, but here it intertwines with geography in subtle ways. The Nile is not just water, it is a god. Hapi, the deity of inundation, determines life and death. Offerings, prayers, festivals, all are attempts to convince an indifferent river to continue its generosity. You might scoff, thinking, it's superstition, but superstition is merely another word for practical adaptation. Humans learned that appeasing forces beyond their control, whether divine or climatic, was a survival strategy. And life is not easy. You wake to the harsh sun, labor through endless fields, and collapse into a hut made of mud and reeds, only to repeat the cycle tomorrow. There is no respite, no luxury, no guarantee of safety. Diseases lurk where stagnant water collects. Floods can ruin weeks of effort in hours. And yet, people endure. They build, they innovate, they measure time with calendars and star charts, always trying to predict the unpredictable. Civilization here is a quiet, relentless negotiation with fate, with climate as the invisible hand guiding every action. Despite hardships, Egypt thrives. Grain is stored, temples are constructed, art and culture flourish. You witness scribes recording the divine and mundane alike, priests officiating ceremonies, and artisans chiseling stone into delicate forms. Civilization is both fragile and enduring, a paradox. You wake to the sound of the Nile lapping against the banks, the soft rustle of papyrus reeds, and the cries of children chasing each other through mud-brick streets. Life in ancient Egypt is deceptively serene at first glance, but beneath the calm surface lies a constant negotiation with the sun, the river, and survival itself. Civilization here is beautiful, yes, but fragile, held together by diligence, ritual, and an almost obsessive attention to cycles of nature. Your first task of the day is simple: get water. The Nile provides, but never without effort. You walk barefoot across slick mud to the canal, balancing a clay jug on your shoulder. The water smells faintly earthy, tinged with algae and sediment. You scoff at the thought of modern plumbing. In your world, a dry day or a flood means chaos. You begin to understand that every moment of comfort in ancient Egypt is borrowed from the river, not guaranteed. Farming dominates your life. Wheat, barley, flax. The inundation has come and gone, leaving silt and fertility in its wake, but timing is everything. Plant too early, and the seeds will drown. Too late, and they'll wither in the sun. You learn to read the land, to anticipate climate's moods, and to pray, quietly, to Hapi, the god of the Nile. Faith here is not optional, it's survival. Even the most skeptical farmer knows that ignoring the river's rhythms is a fast track to famine. Labor is relentless. You carry, dig, plow, harvest, and build. The mud brick homes, the granaries, the temples, everything is human effort imposed upon an unforgiving landscape. You notice small details: the calluses on your hands, the cracks in the clay, the way the sun burns skin after hours in the fields. Civilization is not a monument. It is a routine of constant effort. You marvel that anyone has time to carve hieroglyphs or sculpt statues when survival demands so much, yet here it all coexists. Trade is the lifeline of towns along the Nile. You barter grain, flax, or pottery for fish, stone, and other luxuries. The river is your highway, but a bad flood or a drought upstream can wreck the entire system. You witness merchants arguing, scribes tallying inventories, and boats rocking precariously in the current. Civilization, you realize, is a delicate dance. One misstep from nature or human error, and the whole performance collapses. Religion weaves through every action. You perform rituals not out of devotion alone but practicality. Offerings, prayers, and festivals are attempts to coax favor from gods who, like the river, are indifferent yet demanding. Temples are centers of administration and culture as much as worship. Priests keep records, collect taxes, and arbitrate disputes, all while appeasing invisible forces. You can see the irony. Human systems designed to manage life, ultimately at the mercy of forces beyond comprehension. Even leisure is measured by necessity. Music, storytelling, and games exist, but only between labor cycles. A festival can bring joy, yes, but it is timed to coincide with a safe harvest or river level. The Egyptians are meticulous planners, but all their schedules revolve around climate. Imagine carefully organizing a parade of boats, only to watch it drown under an unanticipated flood. That is life here, beauty and order entwined with risk and dependence. Children learn early that life is negotiation with environment and authority alike. You see them helping in fields, herding animals, or fetching water. Education exists, but only for some: scribes, children of the elite, those who will one day record taxes, laws, or astronomical observations. Everyone else learns through labor, observation, and survival. You can sense the subtle humor. The pharaoh builds pyramids claiming eternity, while ordinary people figure out how to survive until sunset. As dusk falls, the desert air cools slightly, and the Nile reflects fading sunlight like molten gold. Somewhere, someone laughs. Elsewhere, a farmer curses the stubborn soil. Civilization here thrives in cycles of work, faith, and you step into a city that seems impossibly ordered. Streets laid out in perfect grids stretch before you, lined with houses of baked brick, each with its own drainage system. You pause, squinting at the canals and wells that snake between the buildings. This is the Indus Valley, a civilization built on water, planning, and an uncanny sense of balance. And yet, as orderly as it seems, you can feel the invisible hand of climate everywhere, quietly dictating life. The rivers, Indus and its tributaries, are both friend and tyrant. Flooding brings fertility, drawing life from the land, but miscalculate the monsoons and the city suffers. Too much water, and streets become rivers. Too little and granaries shrink. You quickly realize that all this engineering, straight streets, baths, drains, serves one purpose: survival in a climate that is at once generous and capricious. Civilization is nothing without control of water, and even the Indus' meticulous planning is a gamble against nature's whims. Daily life here is surprisingly comfortable, for those who can afford it. Clay houses with flat roofs and private wells suggest organization and foresight. Yet the majority of people still work the land, haul water, maintain canals, or trade goods along the rivers. You feel the pulse of the city: craftsmen shaping bronze tools, potters spinning clay, merchants haggling over beads, and farmers carrying grain from fields outside the city walls. It is impressive, yes, but the constant hum of labor reminds you that luxury is measured against survival. Trade is the lifeblood of the Indus Valley. Goods flow across hundreds of miles: cotton, beads, metals. The climate dictates the timing of every shipment. A delayed monsoon, a river that fails to rise, and the whole network falters. You notice how carefully the city balances commerce with resources, knowing that a single year of misfortune could undo decades of effort. Civilization is, here as elsewhere, a tenuous agreement with forces beyond human control. Religion and governance are mysterious. You wander past inscriptions and seals, scratching your head at symbols no one today can fully decipher. They hint at rituals, markets, and perhaps city laws, but the exact meaning is lost to time. Still, you sense the pragmatism behind them. Religion, administration, and social order all serve to manage the unpredictability of life. Without some system, whether divine or bureaucratic, the delicate balance of urban life could collapse. Life in the streets is rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Children play in courtyards while adults haul water, repair walls, and cook over smoky fires. You smell the aroma of bread baking and the tang of clay ovens. You notice the meticulous drainage systems, marveling at how waste is diverted away from homes and streets, a small triumph over filth, disease, and climate alike. Even here, the people understood that neglecting infrastructure meant chaos, and chaos meant death. Yet there is tension in the air. You sense it in the hurried footsteps, in the worried looks of merchants, in the quiet murmurs of workers inspecting canals. The rivers are generous but unpredictable. Monsoons may fail. Earthquakes may divert streams. Trade routes may dry. And when that happens, even the best-planned cities cannot sustain themselves. Climate is the silent overseer, and its verdict is final. At dusk, the city quiets. Shadows stretch along the perfectly aligned streets. You see rooftops where families gather to escape the heat and hear the distant laughter of children who, for now, remain safe from famine, flood, or disease. Civilization here is fragile, but it is a marvel of human ingenuity, an urban order forged in partnership with nature, yet always at the mercy of its unpredictable moods. You stand for a moment on a rooftop, looking at the labyrinth of streets, canals, and homes. Civilization is You wake to the faint roar of the Indus River, carrying with it the smell of wet soil and the faint tang of fish. The city stretches before you in perfect grids, each street a narrow channel of human ambition. On the surface, it's orderly, clean, almost serene. But as you walk through the bustling alleys, you realize life here is anything but simple. Civilization in the Indus Valley is a delicate negotiation with the elements, and every day brings the subtle tension of survival. Your morning begins with chores as always. Water must be drawn from the wells or canals, clay ovens stoked, and grain measured for the day. You notice the drainage systems beneath your feet, small triumphs of engineering, divining excess water away from homes and streets. Civilization here is not about luxury, it is about control. And control, as you know, is fragile, subject to the whims of monsoons, rivers, and heat. You move to the markets, where merchants display beads, pottery, and textiles. Trade is constant, precise, and precarious. Every shipment depends on water levels, road conditions, and the unpredictable generosity of climate. A single delayed monsoon, a diverted river, and the flow of goods halts. You overhear merchants arguing over contracts, their voices tight with tension. Civilization depends on cooperation, yes, but also on luck, and luck is rarely reliable. Children dart between stalls, playing with sticks and stones, oblivious to the fragile foundation of their daily life. Some are apprenticed to artisans, learning to mold clay or cast bronze. Others help their families in the fields outside the city, pulling water, planting seeds, maintaining canals. Education here is not abstract, it is practical. You quickly understand that knowledge is measured by survival. What you learn in these streets might one day save your life, or at least a day's labor. Farming is the backbone of the city, and the climate is the unseen landlord. Irrigation canals stretch outward, carrying precious water to fields of wheat, barley, and other staples. Too little rainfall and crops fail. Too much and fields are submerged. The people of the Indus Valley are meticulous planners, but meticulous planning does not guarantee success. You notice a farmer muttering curses at the sky, another adjusting canal gates to divert a trickle of water where it is most needed. Civilization here is constant problem-solving against forces beyond human control. Religion and ritual punctuate daily life. You see small shrines, altars, and seals engraved with mysterious symbols. Offerings are made to deities whose names are lost to time, but whose importance is clear. Appease the unseen powers, and perhaps they will bless the harvest, prevent floods, or guide the rivers. Superstition or strategy? It's impossible to say, and in this world, the distinction barely matters. Survival trumps philosophy. The streets are alive with sounds, the clatter of pottery, the hum of conversations, the distant splash of water in canals. You smell bread baking in clay ovens, the scent of clay and wet earth, the faint smoke of cooking fires. Everything is intertwined: trade, agriculture, water, labor, and climate. You feel the rhythm of the city, a delicate dance between order and chaos, mastery and dependence, ambition and humility. Even leisure is a calculated affair. Music, storytelling, and games exist, but they are brief interludes, squeezed between labor and necessity. Civilization allows moments of joy, yes, but only when survival does not demand your full attention. You watch children weave simple toys from reeds, their laughter a small rebellion against the precariousness of their lives. As the sun sets, the city cools slightly, shadows stretching across streets and rooftops. You pause on a terrace and take in the vast, orderly. Welcome to the Maya world, a place where stars, stone, and climate intertwine in ways both brilliant and fragile. City planning here is unlike anything you've seen. Temples soar above plazas, staircases climb skyward, and massive stone platforms create order in a jungle that seems intent on reclaiming everything. The Maya built with foresight, terraces for agriculture, reservoirs to store water, and networks of roads connecting cities across unforgiving terrain. Every stone placed is a negotiation with the environment. Every canal dug a subtle pact with an unpredictable climate. You marvel at their ingenuity but feel a creeping awareness. No amount of planning can fully tame nature. Agriculture is both blessing and curse. Maize, beans, squash, and cacao form the backbone of the diet, but rainfall is inconsistent. Too little rain and crops fail. Too much and fields flood. The Maya learned to read the clouds, observe the stars, and mark the calendar with precision, all in an attempt to anticipate the whims of climate. You realize that their complex astronomy and ritual calendars are not merely for prestige. They are survival tools, honed over generations to wrest a precarious existence from the jungle. Temples and pyramids dominate the skyline, constructed for gods and kings alike. You climb one of the stepped pyramids, each stone rough under your hands, and look out over the city. The jungle stretches endlessly in all directions, alive, vibrant, and patient. The structures seem monumental, almost eternal, but the forest is patient, creeping back steadily, reminding you that permanence is an illusion. These stones will endure, yes, but human dominance is fleeting. Trade and specialization flourish despite environmental challenges. Merchants carry obsidian, jade, salt, and cacao across cities. Artisans carve stone, paint murals, and fashion ceramics. Priests track celestial movements, recording the passage of time with meticulous precision. All of this depends on climate, subtly guiding what can be grown, transported, and consumed. A drought here or there can undo decades of progress, and the Maya know it. You sense the quiet anxiety that underlies even the grandest ceremonies. Human ambition forever in dialogue with the environment. Religion permeates life, entwined with observation and survival. Temples are not just monuments, they are instruments, aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and celestial events. Priests interpret the sky, predicting the rains and advising kings on planting or warfare. Rituals, offerings, and sacrifices are attempts to negotiate with forces beyond human control. You can feel the tension between reverence and desperation, between awe of the cosmos and fear of its indifference. Daily life is both rigorous and vibrant. Children learn farming and craft early, artisans hone skills that will define the city's culture, farmers toil under the sun, constantly vigilant against the next unpredictable storm or dry spell. The jungle hums with life, a constant reminder that civilization exists in precarious harmony with the environment. Noise, laughter, labor, and ritual merge into a rhythm dictated not by kings alone, but by rainfall, soil fertility, and climate's unpredictable moods. Despite these challenges, the Maya achieve astonishing feats of knowledge. Calendars, astronomy, mathematics, and monumental architecture thrive here because humans adapted to the environment, studied patterns, and you wake to the humid, thick air of the Maya lowlands, sticky against your skin, the calls of howler monkeys echoing from the jungle canopy. Life here is a negotiation with humidity, heat, insects, and, of course, the climate that rules every decision. Civilization is a dazzling achievement, yes, but as a Maya subject, you quickly learn that survival is never guaranteed, and brilliance does not mean comfort. Your first task of the day is tending the milpas, the maize fields that feed the city. The sun is relentless, beating down on leaves and soil alike. You can feel sweat rolling down your back as you hoe, plant, and weed. Every row you tend depends on rainfall patterns you can only guess at, because the monsoon is capricious. Too little rain, and your family goes hungry. Too much, and your crops rot. Climate is the silent overseer of your existence. Water management is both a blessing and a burden. Reservoirs and canals store precious rainwater for dry spells, but they require constant maintenance. You spend hours clearing debris, reinforcing banks, and monitoring water flow. Civilization here is fragile. A neglected canal can ruin a harvest, and ruin in a society so dependent on maize is catastrophic. You learn quickly that infrastructure is life itself. Life in the city is noisy, crowded, and hierarchical. Merchants bustle through markets, priests move with ceremonial purpose, artisans hammer and carve, and children weave between feet, learning skills and, inadvertently, patience. You notice that social order is tightly controlled. Work, ritual, and education are all scheduled to maximize survival. Any deviation risks not just failure but chaos. Civilization here is a carefully choreographed dance, and everyone plays a part, whether they want to or not. Religion is omnipresent. You offer small sacrifices, chant along with your neighbors, and observe the priests tracking stars and moons. Ritual is survival in disguise. Aligning temples to solstices, marking eclipses, calculating planting cycles, all of this is about negotiating with forces beyond human control. You wonder if people truly believe in the gods, or if they've simply learned that faith is a tool for coaxing predictability from the unpredictable. Either way, it works for now. Trade forms the backbone of urban life. Obsidian, jade, cacao, and woven goods flow along roads and waterways, connecting city-states. You see merchants arguing over shipments and scribes tallying inventories on clay tablets. Climate is the invisible partner in every transaction. Drought or flood can make trade impossible, and the fragile economic network bends to weather rather than human ambition. You understand quickly that wealth is temporary, and only the resourceful survive. Despite the hardships, life has moments of vibrancy. Festivals erupt in dance, music, and ceremony. Artisans paint murals, carve intricate stele, and craft pottery. You hear flutes, drums, and chants echoing through plazas. And yet, these moments are fleeting, often overshadowed by fear of famine, disease, or a failed harvest. Civilization allows beauty, but only when survival is secured. Children learn early that labor is life. They carry water, help plant, or apprentice to artisans. Education is practical, measured by skill, endurance, and the ability to anticipate the whims of climate. You notice how quickly they adapt. Their play is simulation of the adult world. They negotiate, observe patterns, and practice patience. Life here is both school and battlefield. As night falls, the jungle grows darker, denser, alive with unseen creatures. The city quiets, though the hum of insects and distant animal calls never truly stops. You lie on a mat, exhausted, aware that each day is a fragile triumph over climate and circumstance. Civilization here is impressive, but every achievement. You awaken to the scent of the Tiber River, faint smoke from cooking fires, and the distant clang of metal from early workshops. Rome is young but ambitious, a city built on hills, rivers, and the audacity of human ambition. Civilization here is not merely survival, it is domination. And yet, even Rome, with its stone roads and marble temples, is at the mercy of climate, soil, and the whims of rivers that refuse to bend to human will. The city sprawls across 7 hills, its streets a maze of mud, stone, and human activity. You step carefully, navigating crowded thoroughfares where merchants shout prices, livestock amble unpredictably, and citizens argue over water and grain. You notice immediately, Rome is loud, messy, and alive. Civilization here is organized chaos, and you are both participant and witness to its energy. Rivers and aqueducts dominate life. The Tiber provides water, transport, and fertility for crops along its banks. Engineers build aqueducts to carry water into the city, yet you realize how fragile this system is. Drought, flooding, or neglect could disrupt it all. Even the grandeur of Rome depends on maintaining control over natural forces, something humans have always struggled to do. Agriculture surrounds the city, sustaining a growing population. Wheat, olives, grapes, and vegetables form the backbone of Roman life. Fields outside the city swell with laborers, oxen, and tools, all working in rhythms dictated by climate. You quickly notice the delicate balance. One poor harvest, one late rain, and chaos follows. Civilization is remarkable, yes, but its foundation is precarious. Trade flows along rivers, roads, and eventually across the Mediterranean. Goods, grain, wine, olive oil, metals, move with remarkable coordination. Merchants, scribes, and laborers form the arteries of an empire, yet even this network bends to climate. Flooded roads, unpredictable river levels, or poor harvests upstream can disrupt everything. Rome is grand, but it is always negotiating with forces beyond its control. Military might defines the city's expansion. Legions march, fortifications rise, and roads are laid to bind distant territories to the capital. You observe drills, equipment maintenance, and logistics with a mix of awe and dread. Rome grows not only by ambition but by the sheer effort to maintain control over both people and nature. The empire expands, yet its strength is inseparable from the land and climate it seeks to dominate. Religion, politics, and culture intertwine seamlessly. Temples, forums, and amphitheaters reflect Roman order, law, and ingenuity. Festivals mark agricultural cycles, victories, and divine favor, yet these celebrations depend on stability. Food, water, and climate must cooperate. Without them, ceremonies lose meaning, and even emperors are humbled. Civilization in Rome is structured, but never untouchable. Daily life is exhausting and complex. You see farmers, artisans, merchants, and laborers moving in coordinated chaos. Streets are crowded, markets teeming, and homes bustling with activity. Hygiene is rudimentary, disease is a constant threat. You notice small ironies everywhere. Aqueducts supply water, yet cholera and dysentery persist. Marble columns rise, yet ordinary citizens live in crowded, mud-filled apartments. Civilization's grandeur is always offset by human vulnerability. By nightfall, the city quiets slightly. Fires flicker in windows, the Tiber reflects starlight, and distant wolves howl from the hills. You pause atop a bridge, surveying the sprawling city. Its roads, temples, and workshops, alive with human ingenuity, yet resting on the precarious balance of climate, rivers, and soil. The scale of ambition is breathtaking, but fragility is unavoidable. You realize that Rome, for all its power, depends on the same forces that shaped Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and the Maya. Water, soil, climate, they are silent arbiters of fate, indifferent to empires, armies, and law. You wake to the smell of smoke from cooking fires, livestock bleeding in the streets, and the low murmur of merchants opening their stalls. Life in Rome is loud, chaotic, and relentlessly busy. Civilization here is impressive: roads, aqueducts, baths, forums. But as a Roman subject, you quickly learn that grandeur does not equal comfort. Your life is a daily negotiation with climate, labor, and the sprawling machinery of empire. Your first task is securing water. You navigate crowded streets to reach the public fountain, balancing a clay jug while avoiding carts, pedestrians, and the occasional runaway pig. Aqueducts carry water across the city, yet supply is never guaranteed. Droughts, broken pipes, or mismanagement can leave neighborhoods dry. Civilization's conveniences are always temporary, contingent on human diligence and nature's cooperation. Food is both abundant and fragile. Grain, olives, wine, and vegetables fill markets, but supply depends on harvests from across the empire. You notice that a bad season hundreds of miles away can trigger shortages here. Trade and storage are marvels of logistics, yet they are fragile. Civilization relies on distant cooperation, and the climate is the invisible partner you cannot control. Labor is unrelenting. You might be a farmer, artisan, scribe, or servant. Regardless, your day is dictated by work and survival. Streets are alive with noise, the hammering of tools, the chatter of traders, the braying of animals. You watch as workshops hum with production, artisans carve marble, and scribes tally goods. Even leisure is measured, squeezed between labor and necessity. Civilization is both impressive and exhausting. Hygiene is rudimentary despite the baths. You notice that crowded insulae, the apartment buildings of ordinary citizens, are cramped, poorly ventilated, and prone to disease. The aqueducts bring water, yes, but pathogens flow alongside it. Rome's sophistication has limits. The grandeur of stone and marble cannot mask the vulnerability of everyday life. Religion permeates daily existence. Temples, shrines, and rituals structure your week. You see priests observing omens, offering sacrifices, and performing ceremonies to appease gods who, like the rivers and weather, are indifferent yet demanding. Faith is both comfort and survival strategy. You learn that neglecting ritual is risky, as divine favor often aligns with prosperity and fortune. Trade is everywhere. Merchants transport goods from Egypt, Gaul, Hispania, and beyond. Roads, bridges, and ports are marvels of engineering, yet climate subtly dictates their efficiency. Flooded rivers, stormy seas, or drought-affected grain harvests can disrupt the flow. Civilization's veins, commerce, and transport are always negotiating with forces beyond human control. You see children learning skills early, scribes memorize letters, farmers assist with irrigation, artisans apprentice in workshops. Education is practical, measured by usefulness, endurance, and adaptability. Every child is training for survival in a world where natural and social forces are unpredictable. Civilization demands competence, and incompetence is costly. Despite the hardships, life in Rome is vibrant. Festivals, gladiatorial games, music, and theater punctuate labor and obligation. You notice how moments of joy are always balanced with reminders of mortality, diseases, floods, poor harvests, or political unrest. Civilization allows beauty, but it is never guaranteed, always contingent on human effort and environmental favor. By night, the city quiets slightly, though the hum of life never fully ceases. You lie on a straw mat in a small apartment, exhausted, aware that each day is a fragile triumph over labor, climate, and urban chaos. Civilization here is both awe-inspiring and delicate, a monumental achievement resting on countless small acts of vigilance, planning, and endurance. You realize that life in Rome, for all its grandeur, is a constant negotiation. You awaken to the quiet hum of human achievement. Civilization, for now, seems stable, thriving, and, dare you say it, impressive. Across Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, the Maya lowlands, and Rome, humans have carved order from chaos, building monuments, cities, and systems that defy both time and nature. And yet, as you walk through these golden ages, you notice the ever-present shadow of climate. It enabled brilliance but also constantly threatened to unravel it. In Mesopotamia, the first cities hum with activity. You see scribes recording transactions on clay tablets, farmers tending carefully managed fields, and artisans crafting tools and jewelry. Writing, mathematics, and codified laws emerge here, giving people a sense of order against the unpredictable Tigris and Euphrates. You pause, realizing that civilization's greatest achievements are often born of necessity, humanity striving to tame rivers, not to impress posterity. Egypt glows under the sun, pyramids standing like silent witnesses to ambition. You wander through fields irrigated by the Nile, marvel at temples aligned with celestial events, and observe scribes cataloging grain and goods. Engineering, agriculture, and astronomy intertwine seamlessly. You can almost hear the ironic laughter of the Nile. You build monuments for eternity, and yet your harvest depends on me. Civilization thrives here, but it is never free from the mercy of nature. In the Indus Valley, order is astonishing. Streets form grids, drainage systems function flawlessly, and trade connects cities across hundreds of miles. You stroll past workshops and markets, impressed by the meticulous coordination. And yet, the monsoons, unpredictable rivers, and soil fertility are always silently dictating what is possible. Civilization here is brilliance balanced on the knife edge of environmental reality. The Maya lowlands are alive with ritual, astronomy, and architecture. You climb a pyramid and look out over the city. Terraces, reservoirs, and stone platforms designed to manage both water and society. You witness scribes calculating calendars, priests observing the stars, and farmers anticipating rains. Every achievement, no matter how grand, exists in conversation with climate, an invisible partner that can nurture or destroy with equal ease. Rome, sprawling and ambitious, dazzles with roads, aqueducts, baths, and temples. You navigate crowded streets and witness trade networks connecting distant provinces. Legionnaires march along meticulously built roads, farmers bring grain to feed cities, and artisans craft luxury goods. The empire's brilliance is undeniable, but you notice the constant negotiation with rivers, droughts, and soil. Human ingenuity reaches incredible heights, yet climate remains the silent director of the performance. In every civilization, achievements are remarkable. Writing, mathematics, astronomy, monumental architecture, trade networks, irrigation systems, and complex governments all emerge. You can see the pride of humanity etched into stone, clay, and soil. Yet you also notice the irony. All this brilliance depends on factors humans cannot fully control. A failed harvest, an unexpected flood, or a prolonged drought can destabilize even the most sophisticated system. Daily life in these golden ages is equally complex. Farmers, laborers, merchants, scribes, artisans, and priests navigate routines structured by both human systems and climate realities. Festivals, art, religion, and music punctuate toil, offering glimpses of beauty, but never escape. Civilization is both awe-inspiring and fragile, a testament to human ingenuity in dialogue with an indifferent natural world. As dusk falls across these ancient lands, you pause to take in the expanse of human achievement. Cities glow softly in fading light, rivers shimmer, pyramids cast long shadows, and temples seem. You wake to the low hum of unease. The Tigris and Euphrates, once generous and predictable, have grown temperamental. Fields that used to flourish now struggle under inconsistent flooding, and the clay tablets in city archives record more bad news than good. Civilization here, once a marvel of order, is beginning to show cracks, and you are in the thick of it. Your first task is to inspect the irrigation canals. Muddy banks collapse under your feet, silt clogs channels that used to run smoothly. You curse silently as you adjust gates and clear debris, knowing full well that these minor failures can cascade into disaster. Crops depend on water, and water depends on both nature and human maintenance, a combination that is now failing. Civilization is fragile, and you are painfully aware of it. Trade, once the lifeblood of the city, falters. Caravans delay shipments of grain and timber, markets feel emptier with each passing day. Merchants argue, scribes tally losses, and tension coils through the streets. Even the most meticulously planned economies are no match for climate shifts and resource scarcity. You notice how quickly frustration turns to fear, and fear, inevitably, turns to unrest. Foreign threats loom as well. Nomadic tribes from surrounding regions see weakness and move in. You watch soldiers march, hastily reinforcing walls and gates, yet the city's defenses feel thinner, stretched too far to manage both internal and external pressures. Civilization built on clever engineering and bureaucracy now struggles simply to maintain its borders. You sense that human ingenuity has limits, and limits are being tested. Famine whispers through the city like a cruel joke. Barley and wheat fail in unpredictable patterns. Granaries once full now hold only the bare minimum. You see families rationing meals, children eating less, elders calculating how many days remain before hunger becomes desperation. Civilization, you realize, depends not only on ingenuity but on cooperation and abundance. And when abundance fails, chaos simmers just below the surface. Politics, too, fractures. Kings and officials argue over resources, tax collection falters, and corruption spreads. Decisions once made with care now feel reactive, desperate, and inconsistent. You notice the irony. A society that once thrived on organization now collapses under its own complexity, amplified by environmental strain. Civilization's brilliance seems almost cruelly temporary. Disease finds easy purchase in crowded neighborhoods. Malnutrition, poor sanitation, and overworked laborers create ideal conditions for outbreaks. You see neighbors fall ill, and even small communities are decimated in a matter of weeks. The Tigris and Euphrates, once lifelines, now seem indifferent observers, their waters reflecting both brilliance and decay. By night, the city is quieter, but tension is palpable. You hear arguments, whispers of revolt, and the distant clash of weapons. Civilization has survived decades, even centuries, but the combination of climate, invasion, famine, and political decay feels overwhelming. You lie on your mat, exhausted, knowing that survival is no longer guaranteed and that your daily efforts may be undone by forces entirely beyond your control. The irony is bitter. The systems that once enabled Mesopotamia's rise, irrigation, trade, governance, are now the very structures that amplify its vulnerability. Each canal, granary, and wall is a reminder of past genius and present fragility. You sense that the collapse is not sudden, but creeping, a slow unweaving of human order, climate, and ambition. Congrats, you have witnessed the beginning of the fall of Mesopotamia. The cities are still standing, the rivers still flow, but civilization teeters on the edge. Soon, we will visit Egypt, where foreign conquest and the shifting Nile signal the slow decline of one of history's greatest civilizations. You wake to the faint roar of the Nile, But something is off. The river, which once dictated life with predictable generosity, now feels capricious. Floods arrive late, silt deposits shrink, and fields that fed your family for generations falter. Civilization here, built on meticulous observation and devotion to the river, is showing signs of strain, and you are living through it. Your morning begins with inspection of the irrigation canals. Mud and debris block channels that once ran smoothly. Farmers scramble to divert water, repairing banks and gates in a frantic dance with nature. You curse silently. One misstep could ruin crops. One failed harvest could starve thousands. Civilization, you realize, is only as stable as the forces it depends upon. And the Nile, for all its history, is not obligated to cooperate. Trade and taxation falter. Grain shipments from Upper Egypt are delayed, markets grow tense, and scribes tally losses instead of abundance. The temples, once vibrant centers of economic and religious activity, now hum with anxious murmurs. Merchants and priests alike recognize that climate instability and political tension are straining the city's lifeblood. Civilization's grandeur depends on order, and order is slipping through the cracks. Foreign powers see opportunity. You watch soldiers reinforce gates while messengers deliver warnings of approaching invaders. The pharaoh may sit on a throne claiming divine authority, but even kings are vulnerable when climate, famine, and political instability converge. Civilization's genius is impressive, but it is always contingent, an illusion of permanence under constant threat. Famine spreads quietly yet relentlessly. Crops fail, livestock weaken, and granaries, once brimming with surplus, shrink alarmingly. Families ration meals, children grow gaunt, and desperation edges into the streets. You notice the cruel irony. A civilization famed for monumental pyramids and organized bureaucracy is now at the mercy of weather patterns it once sought to understand and predict. Disease follows scarcity. Malnutrition, crowded living conditions, and stagnant water create a perfect storm for illness. You see neighbors fall ill, some never recovering. The Nile, source of life, is now the silent witness to decay. Civilization is a delicate network of labor, water, and social cohesion, and each thread frays under pressure. Politics and administration become chaotic. Officials quarrel over resources, collection of tribute falters, and corruption spreads. You sense that the very systems that enabled Egypt's rise, bureaucracy, irrigation, centralized authority, are now amplifying its vulnerability. Each decree, each miscalculation, each delayed decision accelerates the decline. Civilization's brilliance is shadowed by its own complexity. By night, the air is cooler, but anxiety lingers. Fires flicker in homes, children sleep uneasily, and adults murmur worries about harvests and invaders. You lie on a mat of reeds, exhausted and wary, aware that your daily survival now depends on a fragile combination of human effort and climate luck. Civilization is not guaranteed, it is a constant, precarious negotiation. The irony is unmistakable. Egypt, once synonymous with stability and eternal monuments, is vulnerable to the very river that once guaranteed its power. The Nile does not care about kings, priests, or pyramids. Civilization can endure for centuries, but it can also unravel quietly, gradually, without warning, leaving monuments as hollow reminders of human ambition. Congrats! You have witnessed the early stages of Egypt's decline. The river still flows, the pyramids still cast long shadows, but civilization teeters. Soon, we will explore the fall of the Indus Valley, where climate change and trade collapse turn one of history's most ordered societies into a haunting mystery. You wake to the distant murmur of rivers, once steady lifelines, now unpredictable and restless. The monsoons that shaped life here for centuries falter. Fields that used to yield abundant grain are patchy and unreliable, canals silted and broken. Civilization, which seemed so orderly, now feels fragile, and you are in the midst of its quiet unraveling. Your morning begins with a walk along the streets of your city. Mud brick houses remain, drains still channel water, but subtle cracks betray the strain of time and neglect. You inspect irrigation channels, noticing clogs, collapsing embankments, and inconsistent water flow. Every day is a negotiation with nature. Divert too little and crops fail, divert too much and homes flood. Civilization is fragile, and your hands bear witness to it. Trade, once the lifeblood of this networked society, falters. Merchants hesitate, shipments arrive late, and distant cities no longer synchronize production. The once fluid exchange of grain, beads, and tools slows to a crawl. Markets echo with tension instead of abundance. You overhear traders mutter about shortages, long routes disrupted, and the unreliability of rivers. Civilization, you realize, is dependent on cooperation and predictability, and both are breaking down. Climate is merciless. Droughts stretch for years, failing crops and emptying granaries. You see families rationing grain, children growing thinner with each passing week. Floods, once welcome for their silt, now arrive erratically, washing away fields and eroding canals. Nature, silent and indifferent, seems to mock the human effort that built cities so carefully. Civilization is a delicate scaffolding atop an unpredictable environment, and the scaffolding creaks. Social cohesion falters. Leaders struggle to maintain order, communities fracture, and some families migrate in search of water and fertile land. You witness tension in streets once orderly, neighbors arguing over resources, small skirmishes breaking out. Civilization relies not only on engineering and trade, but also on trust, cooperation, and adherence to social norms, and those threads fray quickly when survival is threatened. Disease and malnutrition spread quietly. With food scarce and sanitation harder to maintain under environmental stress, illness takes hold. You see people weakened by hunger, yet forced to continue laboring in fields, canals, and workshops. Civilization's brilliance, its urban planning, trade networks, and sophisticated infrastructure, cannot shield individuals from environmental and social collapse. Political structures crumble silently. Records grow sparse, authority weakens, and cities that once managed everything from water to trade begin to fail. You notice the irony. The very systems that enabled the Indus Valley's remarkable order, standardized weights, urban layouts, and bureaucratic oversight, are now powerless against climate and environmental degradation. Civilization, for all its genius, is not invincible. By evening, the air feels heavy and still. You watch the sun dip behind distant hills, casting long shadows across silent streets. Granaries are emptier, canals are clogged, and a sense of uncertainty hangs over the city. You lie on your mat of reeds, exhausted, aware that every day is a delicate negotiation between labor, ingenuity, and the merciless environment. Civilization can appear eternal, but you now see it for what it is, a temporary triumph over circumstance, always threatened by the forces it cannot fully control. The irony is stark. The Indus Valley, a civilization defined by order, precision, and urban brilliance, succumbs quietly to drought, trade collapse, and environmental shifts. There is no dramatic siege, no fiery destruction, just a slow unraveling, leaving cities abandoned, canals dried, and streets reclaimed by the land. Civilization endures in memory, but the lived experience fades. You wake to the dense, humid jungle, thick with the calls of unseen creatures. The Maya cities, once thriving with temples, plazas, and terraces, feel quieter, heavier, as if the forest itself has begun to reclaim its territory. The rains, once reliable guides for planting and survival, have become inconsistent. Civilization here, so brilliantly intertwined with stars and stone, is now under silent siege by nature and internal tensions. Your morning begins with inspection of terraces and reservoirs. Once carefully engineered to capture and store rainwater, many are now damaged, silted, or overgrown. You rush to divert water to surviving crops, realizing that every failed canal or eroded reservoir threatens food for the city. Civilization here was a triumph of observation and planning, but even the best engineers cannot predict prolonged drought or unpredictable rainfall. Fields of maize, beans, and squash wither under the relentless sun, and reservoirs shrink dangerously. You see farmers muttering prayers, adjusting irrigation channels, and rationing seeds. A year of drought can decimate communities, and consecutive years are devastating. You notice the cruel irony. The Maya observed the heavens to predict agricultural cycles, yet the forces of climate remain fundamentally uncontrollable. Trade slows to a trickle. Obsidian, jade, salt, and cacao move less frequently between city-states. You notice merchants hesitating, caravans delayed or cancelled, and marketplaces emptier than usual. Civilization is interconnected, yet fragile. When climate falters, the delicate networks that sustain urban life collapse almost silently, leaving cities vulnerable. Social tensions rise. Leaders struggle to maintain control, cities fragment, and internal conflict grows. You hear rumors of rivalries escalating into violence, disputes over resources turning deadly. Civilization relies not only on ingenuity but on cooperation and order. And when resources are scarce, the bonds holding society together weaken. You notice the irony. The very systems that enabled monumental architecture and complex governance now strain under pressure. Disease and malnutrition spread quietly. With crops failing and water limited, communities become vulnerable. Children grow weaker, adults labor longer to maintain terraces and reservoirs, and illness finds easy prey. Civilization's brilliance, its mathematics, astronomy, and architecture, cannot shield ordinary people from hunger, disease, and environmental stress. Daily routines once filled with ceremony, work, and celebration now feel precarious. You move carefully through quieter plazas, past abandoned homes, and overgrown streets. Temples still rise above the jungle, but their steps are empty, their rituals incomplete. Civilization here is visibly fracturing, a remarkable network of human achievement undone by climate, scarcity, and internal pressures. By evening, the air is heavy with humidity and uncertainty. You pause atop a pyramid, surveying the city below, terraces cracked, reservoirs diminished, and streets quiet. Nature encroaches slowly but persistently, reclaiming what humans once meticulously engineered. Civilization is still present, yet it is fragile, vulnerable to forces beyond ambition, ritual, or skill. The irony is stark. The Maya achieved monumental brilliance in observation, planning, and architecture, yet drought, ecological strain, and internal conflict unravel their cities with quiet inevitability. No single disaster strikes. Rather, the collapse is slow, creeping, and inescapable, a reminder that even civilizations built on knowledge and ingenuity are subject to nature's authority. Congrats, you have witnessed the decline of the Maya. The temples remain, the stones still stand, but human ambition has faltered, leaving a jungle slowly reclaiming a civilization of stars, stone, and ritual. Next, we turn to the grandeur and fragility of Rome, where overexpansion, corruption, and environmental pressures combine to challenge one of history's most famous empires. You wake to the clang of distant bells, the rumble of carts over worn cobblestones, and the scent of smoke mixed with something fouler, an unmistakable aroma of decay. Rome, once a city of stone, law, and order, feels heavy with the weight of its own ambition. Civilization here, sprawling and grand, is beginning to unravel, and you are in the thick of it. Your morning begins with inspection of the streets and aqueducts. You notice cracks in walls, silted channels, and aqueducts that leak. The Tiber, once a dependable lifeline, floods unpredictably or dries to an embarrassing trickle. You curse silently as you repair what you can. Civilization's infrastructure, brilliant in conception, now creaks under the weight of overuse, neglect, and environmental strain. Trade falters. Grain shipments from distant provinces are delayed or spoiled. Markets feel tense rather than bustling. Merchants argue, scribes tally losses, and ordinary citizens grow wary. You observe the cruel irony. The empire that connected the Mediterranean through roads, ports, and rivers now falters because coordination depends on stability, and stability is slipping. Civilization thrives on order, but order is fragile. Overexpansion strains the empire's veins. Legions stretch across distant lands, tasked with maintaining control over territories that feel increasingly alien. Roads crumble, garrisons weaken, and resources are thinly spread. You notice that the genius of Roman organization is also its vulnerability. The more ground it covers, the harder it becomes to sustain, and every logistical failure magnifies unrest and scarcity. Corruption spreads quietly yet relentlessly. Governors siphon resources, officials prioritize personal gain, and citizens notice, murmuring complaints that rarely reach ears willing to act. You sense the irony. Rome's bureaucracy, once a tool of stability, now amplifies instability, enabling collapse almost as efficiently as it once enabled growth. Civilization is clever, but cleverness alone cannot protect against greed and inefficiency. Famine and disease add invisible pressure. Poor harvests, overtaxed farmland, and disrupted trade bring scarcity, while crowded urban centers become breeding grounds for illness. You see people weaken, struggle to work, and rely on charity or public grain distribution that is increasingly insufficient. Civilization's brilliance, roads, aqueducts, and markets cannot shield humans from basic vulnerability. Social tension escalates. Citizens argue over resources, soldiers mutiny, and provinces threaten rebellion. The city's order feels brittle, and you walk through streets that seem both familiar and tense, aware that a single spark could ignite chaos. Civilization, you notice, is a delicate balance of infrastructure, cooperation, and environmental stability, and all three are faltering simultaneously. By evening, the city cools slightly, but anxiety lingers. Fires flicker in windows, the Tiber reflects starlight over empty or chaotic streets, and distant shouts hint at disputes escalating into violence. You pause atop a bridge, surveying a sprawling city that once seemed eternal. The scale of ambition is breathtaking, yet the fragility is undeniable. Every aqueduct, every road, every grain shipment depends on human effort and environmental cooperation, both increasingly unreliable. The irony is sharp. Rome, the empire of law, organization, and ambition, is collapsing not solely because of invaders or revolution, but because the very systems that created its greatness, overexpansion, complex bureaucracy, and reliance on distant provinces, now amplify its vulnerabilities. Civilization, for all its genius, is always subject to forces it cannot fully control. Congrats, you have witnessed the decline of Rome. Roads still stretch across continents, aqueducts still carry water, and monuments remain. Yet human ambition falters, bureaucracy strains, and climate continues its quiet, unyielding rule. Soon, we will explore the lessons these collapses teach us. You sit quietly, looking across the ruins, canals, temples, pyramids, and aqueducts of civilizations long past. Dust drifts through streets once bustling, and the air hums with stories of human ambition, brilliant, fragile, and ultimately fleeting. You realize that the rise and fall of Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, the Maya, and Rome share eerie patterns. Civilization, it seems, is always negotiating with forces far larger than itself. The first lesson is obvious. Climate is not optional. Rivers, rainfall, monsoons, and droughts dictate far more than kings, priests, or armies. You remember the Tigris and Euphrates, once faithful, now capricious. The Nile, generous for centuries, falters in drought and conquest. Monsoon patterns in the Indus Valley break trade and irrigation, and Maya reservoirs shrink under relentless sun. Even Rome's sprawling empire depends on predictable rains and fertile soil. Civilization thrives when the environment cooperates, and suffers when it doesn't. Second, complexity can be a double-edged sword. Intricate irrigation, vast trade networks, and sprawling bureaucracies enable growth, but they also magnify vulnerability. You've seen Mesopotamia's canals silted, Egypt's bureaucracy strained, and Rome's provinces stretched thin. Complexity is human genius in motion, but it amplifies the impact of failure. One small problem can cascade into disaster, a reminder that brilliance is never immunity. Third, social cohesion is fragile. Civilization relies on cooperation, trust, and shared effort. When resources fail, social bonds strain. The Maya city-states fracture under drought, trade collapses in the Indus Valley, and Roman citizens grow restless under overtaxation. You notice that when humans stop cooperating, even the most sophisticated systems falter. Ambition without unity is like a temple built on sand, impressive yet doomed. Fourth, human ambition is both remarkable and hubristic. You've watched Egyptians erect pyramids, Maya build astronomical pyramids, Romans span continents with roads and aqueducts. Yet ambition without humility often accelerates collapse. Overexpansion, overengineering, and overconfidence leave societies exposed. Nature doesn't negotiate, and neither does scarcity or disease. Civilization grows spectacularly, but never invincibly. Fifth, collapse is rarely dramatic, often slow. You notice that most of these civilizations didn't fall in a single night. The Indus Valley fades quietly, Maya cities empty over decades, Rome unravels amid a mix of overreach, invasion, and environmental pressure. Collapse is a creeping shadow, subtle, inevitable, and cruelly patient. You've learned that watching it unfold is unsettling because brilliance and decay coexist, sometimes for generations. Finally, lessons are visible but ignored. Every civilization leaves behind ruins, canals, pyramids, and inscriptions, all evidence of success and failure. Yet humans rarely heed history until consequences arrive. You sense the irony. Civilizations fall despite knowledge, planning, and foresight. Nature, scarcity, and human ambition do not pause for reflection. Civilization demands vigilance, humility, and adaptability, qualities often overlooked in moments of confidence. By evening, the air cools, and you sit among stones, broken walls, and overgrown canals. You realize the true measure of civilization is not only its monuments, but its resilience in the face of forces beyond control. Brilliance is awe-inspiring, yes, but vulnerability is inevitable. Civilization is a delicate balance between ambition, cooperation, and environment, a balance humans have always struggled to maintain. The irony, as ever, is unmistakable. Every empire, city, and society you've witnessed grew spectacularly and fell, often in ways you sit quietly, gazing over ruins scattered across deserts, jungles, and river valleys. The wind stirs dust from Mesopotamia, rustles reeds along the Nile, and lifts leaves from the Maya terraces. Civilization, you realize, is both astonishing and predictable, brilliant in its ingenuity, fragile in its dependence on forces far beyond human control. And as you reflect, patterns emerge, subtle but undeniable, linking societies separated by geography and centuries. First, geography dictates opportunity and vulnerability. Mesopotamia's fertile plains between rivers allow first cities to flourish, but those same rivers flood unpredictably. Egypt's Nile brings stability, but only when its cycles remain reliable. The Indus Valley relies on monsoons, the Maya on rain and reservoirs, and Rome on rivers and farmlands spread across continents. You notice that civilization's rise is always contingent on place, and place is never entirely predictable. Ambition alone cannot overcome environmental limits. Second, resource management is the invisible heartbeat. Irrigation, granaries, reservoirs, and roads are not mere conveniences, they are lifelines. You walk among canals clogged with silt, terraces parched by drought, and granaries emptied by poor harvests. Civilization succeeds when humans coordinate labor, observe patterns, and plan for scarcity, but even the most meticulous management cannot control nature entirely. Every innovation carries the seeds of its own vulnerability. Third, population density amplifies both success and failure. Cities allow specialization, trade, culture, and monumental architecture. But density also concentrates risk, disease, famine, social unrest. You observe the Maya plazas once teeming with people, now echoing with quiet tension, Roman streets bustling, yet reliant on distant grain shipments, Indus cities carefully ordered, yet vulnerable to climate shifts. Civilization is remarkable, yes, but only when it maintains a delicate balance between growth and sustainability. Fourth, Society depends on cooperation, and cooperation depends on trust. Leadership, bureaucracy, religious authority, and trade networks all hinge on human coordination. When trust erodes through corruption, scarcity, or conflict, civilization unravels quickly. You notice Mesopotamian canals abandoned, Indus streets empty, and Roman provinces rebelled. Civilization thrives when humans work together. Collapse follows when that thread snaps. Fifth, ambition can outpace resilience. Monumental architecture, sprawling roads, complex governance. These are hallmarks of achievement. Yet ambition unchecked magnifies vulnerability. Overexpansion, overengineering, and reliance on distant provinces create fragility. You see it in Rome's stretched legions, Maya city-states overtaxed by climate, and Egypt's bureaucracies strained by drought and foreign conquest. Human brilliance is awe-inspiring, but fragile. Sixth, collapse is often gradual, rarely spectacular. The Indus Valley vanishes quietly, Maya cities empty slowly, Rome declines over centuries. You realize that decay is often invisible until it reaches a tipping point. Civilization is not a sudden failure. It is a slow unraveling of labor, trust, environment, and ambition. Watching it unfold is disorienting because brilliance and decay coexist, sometimes for generations. Finally, lessons are present if we pay attention. Every ruin, canal, temple, and stela tells a story of adaptation, ingenuity, and fragility. You notice the irony. Humans often ignore these lessons until scarcity, conflict, or environmental change forces reckoning. History is generous in its warnings if you are willing to read them. Civilization is a conversation with the natural world, one that rewards observation, humility, and adaptability. You wake to the quiet rhythm of wind, rain, and river flow, realizing that civilization's true master is not kings, generals, or priests, it is climate. For thousands of years, human societies have risen, flourished, and fallen in conversation with rainfall, temperature, and environmental shifts. Civilization may think it dominates the world, but climate is always the quiet arbiter of success and failure. In Mesopotamia, you notice the Tigris and Euphrates dictate the rhythm of life. Predictable floods allow farming and urban growth. Unpredictable floods, droughts, or silted canals bring famine and unrest. Civilization here is a constant negotiation with water, an understanding that abundance and scarcity are two sides of the same coin. You realize that kings and scribes are powerless without the river's cooperation. Egypt offers a similar story. The Nile, faithful for centuries, dictates planting, harvest, and survival. When floods fail, famine strikes. When they rise too high, homes and granaries are lost. You walk along the riverbanks, imagining thousands of years of planning, labor, and ritual aimed at interpreting this simple yet unpredictable force. Civilization is impressive, but it is ultimately a partnership with nature, one that humans cannot fully control. The Indus Valley is no different. Monsoons feed the fields, rivers deposit fertile silt, and urban planning relies on predictable rainfall. Yet shifts in monsoon patterns or river courses disrupt trade, irrigation, and settlement. You see canals clogged, streets empty, and granaries diminishing. Climate here is subtle but merciless, silently dictating whether a society thrives or falters. Civilization depends on patterns, and patterns are fragile. In the Maya lowlands, rainfall is life itself. Terraces, reservoirs, and water management are sophisticated, yet extended droughts still devastate crops and communities. You watch priests calculating calendars and farmers adjusting planting cycles, realizing that all their ingenuity can only mitigate, not eliminate, environmental risk. Civilization is brilliant, but always negotiating with an indifferent climate. Rome, sprawling and ambitious, relies on rivers, fertile land, and distant provinces to sustain its empire. You notice how floods, droughts, and poor harvests ripple across urban centers, weakening trade, inflating prices, and straining social cohesion. The empire's infrastructure is extraordinary, yet even the best roads and aqueducts cannot insulate citizens from climate's unpredictable whims. Civilization is impressive, but never invincible. Patterns emerge as you reflect. Civilizations rise where climate is favorable, develop systems to manage resources, and thrive when environmental conditions align with human ambition. Yet those same societies falter when climate shifts, extremes occur, or variability disrupts the delicate balance. You notice that collapse is rarely sudden. It is often slow, creeping, and intertwined with other pressures: social, political, and economic. Climate is never an isolated factor, but it is always an underlying one. Daily life across civilizations reflects this reality. Farmers, laborers, merchants, and artisans all adapt to the rhythms of climate. They plant according to seasonal cycles, store surplus in good years, and ration carefully when scarcity looms. Rituals, festivals, and governance are all influenced, consciously or unconsciously, by the environment. You realize that climate shapes not just survival but culture, politics, and social organization itself. By evening, you sit among ruins, terraces, and canals, thinking about the patterns you've witnessed. Civilizations rise in harmony with climate, they innovate to mitigate variability, and they collapse when adaptation fails. You wake to the smell of earth after rain, realizing that while climate may shape civilization, humans are not passive participants. Across time and space, societies have adapted, sometimes brilliantly, sometimes desperately, to the challenges of rivers, droughts, floods, and shifting seasons. Civilization survives not through hubris alone, but through innovation, observation, and relentless trial and error. In Mesopotamia, adaptation begins with irrigation. You walk along canals dug by countless hands, diverting water to fields that otherwise would go dry. Farmers reinforce embankments, adjust gates, and store surplus grain in clay jars. Civilization here is not just about building cities. It is about bending rivers, anticipating floods, and mitigating scarcity. You notice the irony: even as humans master their environment, they remain subject to its moods. Egypt demonstrates a quieter, disciplined adaptation. You watch peasants along the Nile timing planting with floodwaters, priests observing the river's rise, and scribes recording measurements for future generations. Reservoirs, canals, and granaries store abundance, ensuring survival through variability. Civilization thrives when humans learn to anticipate nature, not just react to it. A subtle dance between dependence and control. The Indus Valley takes adaptation to another level. Urban planning integrates drainage, flood control, and water storage. Streets are laid with precision, houses built above flood levels, and reservoirs catch the monsoon. You navigate the streets, impressed by both foresight and meticulous labor. Civilization here survives because humans observed patterns over generations and built systems resilient enough to endure environmental stress. Until, of course, climate shifts exceed even their careful planning. In the Maya lowlands, adaptation becomes ingenious and ritualized. Terraces capture rain, reservoirs store water, and planting cycles follow both seasonal and astronomical cues. Priests and farmers collaborate, using observation and calculation to predict droughts. You witness ordinary people relying on sophisticated engineering while simultaneously participating in religious rituals that manage social cohesion and environmental behavior. Civilization survives when adaptation is both practical and cultural. Rome, sprawling and complex, relies on infrastructure, logistics, and administration to adapt. Roads carry food, aqueducts deliver water, and grain storage mitigates poor harvests. Soldiers, merchants, and bureaucrats all play a role in maintaining resilience. Yet adaptation has limits. Overextension, corruption, or prolonged climate stress expose vulnerabilities. You realize that no matter how impressive, human systems are always negotiating with forces beyond control. Daily life everywhere reflects constant adaptation. Farmers check soil and water daily, artisans adjust production to seasonal patterns, and rulers enforce laws to manage resources. Rituals, ceremonies, and governance structures are intertwined with environmental management. You notice a recurring theme. Civilization is not a single triumph. It is a continuous, collective effort to survive and thrive amid uncertainty. Adaptation is also iterative. Failures teach lessons. Canals collapse, granaries overflow or empty, reservoirs dry. Communities rebuild smarter, stronger, more cautiously. You see ingenuity born of necessity, new crop rotations, reinforced embankments, trade networks rerouted. Civilization is resilient when humans learn, adjust, and anticipate, yet remains vulnerable when lessons are ignored or stretched too thin. By evening, you sit atop a terrace or hill, surveying rivers, fields, and cities. The sun casts long shadows, illuminating both the ingenuity and vulnerability of humans. You sit among the ruins of civilizations, the air heavy with dust, heat, and faint echoes of voices long gone. As you reflect, you notice that despite differences in geography, culture, and time, these societies, Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, the Maya, Rome, follow eerily similar rhythms. Civilization, it seems, is not random. It is patterned, predictable, and occasionally cruelly ironic. The first pattern is geography as both cradle and cage. Fertile rivers, predictable rains, and strategic locations allow cities to grow, trade to flourish, and empires to expand. Mesopotamia thrived between the Tigris and Euphrates, Egypt along the Nile, the Indus in river valleys, the Maya near seasonal rainfall, and Rome on rivers and coasts with arable land. Yet geography also imposes limits. Floods, droughts, soil exhaustion, and vulnerability to invasion shape destiny as much as ingenuity does. Civilization rises where opportunity aligns with environment and falls when limits are exceeded. Second, complexity enables brilliance and fragility. Writing, governance, trade networks, irrigation, and monumental architecture are hallmarks of civilization. You've seen scribes in Mesopotamia, bureaucrats in Egypt, urban planners in the Indus, priests in Maya cities, and administrators in Rome. Each system allows remarkable coordination, but also creates points of failure. Canals silted, trade networks disrupted, or bureaucracies mismanaged can cascade into crisis. Complexity is civilization's crown, and its Achilles heel. Third, social cohesion underpins survival. Cooperation allows monumental projects, labor specialization, and shared defense. Yet trust is fragile. When scarcity, corruption, or internal conflict rises, cohesion falters. Maya city-states fight among themselves, Roman provinces rebel, Mesopotamian canals are abandoned. Civilization thrives when humans work together, but collapses when trust is strained. You notice the irony. A civilization's greatest strength, organization, is often the first to unravel when stress arrives. Fourth, ambition accelerates both growth and risk. Monumental architecture, vast empires, and trade networks demonstrate human genius. But overexpansion, overengineering, and over-reliance on distant resources amplify vulnerabilities. Rome stretches its legions too thin, the Maya build terraces that fail under drought, Egypt's bureaucracy strains during famine. Ambition creates brilliance, but also heightens fragility. You see the pattern. The higher civilization climbs, the farther it falls when pressures mount. Fifth, collapse is gradual, often invisible. Few cities fall in a single dramatic event. The Indus Valley fades, Maya cities empty over decades, Rome declines over centuries. The process is slow. Environmental stress, resource depletion, social tension, and political mismanagement converge, eroding stability. Civilization can appear eternal until tipping points arrive unexpectedly. You realize that collapse is more a whisper than a roar, often leaving only ruins and subtle traces behind. Sixth, environment remains the silent director. Rivers, rainfall, monsoons, floods, and droughts shape every stage, rise, peak, and decline. You've watched Mesopotamian canals, Nile floods, monsoon patterns, Maya reservoirs, and Roman grain shipments all dictate outcomes. Human innovation mitigates, adapts, and delays, but cannot eliminate environmental influence. Civilization negotiates with nature daily, and nature always has the final say. Finally, lessons persist if observed. Every ruin, granary, you sit quietly among ruins, temples, canals, and terraces, the wind carrying dust and faint echoes of lives long past. And yet, despite the inevitability of collapse, you notice something remarkable. Humans keep trying. Civilization rises again and again, learning, adapting, and persisting in the face of drought, flood, disease, famine, and war. Resilience is the quiet companion of ambition, always present even when fragility dominates. In Mesopotamia, despite repeated invasions, flooding, and drought, people rebuild their cities. You walk along streets that have seen countless cycles of construction and decay. Each generation adapts slightly, canals reinforced, granaries improved, crops rotated differently. Civilization is not a one-time triumph. It is a series of persistent efforts, each trying to withstand the whims of rivers, weather, and human ambition. Egypt demonstrates a similar pattern. The Nile floods, dynasties rise and fall, and foreign conquerors arrive. Yet the people endure, maintaining agriculture, religious practice, and governance. You notice the irony. Even as civilizations topple around them, humans innovate to survive. Pyramids remain, but daily life continues in new forms, proving that resilience is not monument building. It is persistence in the face of disruption. The Indus Valley offers lessons in subtle adaptation. Urban planners, engineers, and farmers design cities to manage water, floods, and trade. Even when environmental shifts exceed expectations, the cities persist for generations, and some aspects of knowledge, culture, and trade survive, scattered across the region. Civilization, you realize, is not about perfection. It is about durability, flexibility, and incremental improvement. The Maya lowlands reveal resilience intertwined with ritual and observation. Terraces, reservoirs, and calendars demonstrate ingenuity in predicting rainfall and managing resources. Even amid droughts, society persists, adjusting planting cycles, reinforcing water systems, and maintaining social cohesion as long as possible. You see the quiet truth. Humans survive by observing, calculating, and acting with foresight, even when nature seems indifferent. Rome, despite overexpansion, corruption, and invasions, leaves behind a legacy of roads, aqueducts, and legal systems that influence centuries to come. You notice that resilience is often invisible. It does not prevent collapse, but it ensures that lessons, knowledge, and infrastructure persist. Civilization may falter, but humans rarely abandon the attempt to rebuild, reorganize, and innovate. Daily life across civilizations reflects small acts of resilience. Farmers improvise irrigation, artisans adjust production, families store surplus, and communities negotiate scarcity. Every decision, every repair, every ration is part of a larger, ongoing effort to survive. Civilization persists not through perfection, but through repeated adaptation and relentless effort. By evening, you sit atop a terrace, observing rivers, fields, and monuments. The sun casts long shadows over ruins and terraces, reminding you that resilience is both visible and hidden. Civilization may fail spectacularly, but humans endure quietly, rebuilding and learning. Ambition persists, tempered by experience, observation, and necessity. You notice that this cycle, rise, adaptation, collapse, persistence, is as old as human society itself. The irony is persistent. Humans are fragile yet enduring. Cities crumble, governments fail, and empires vanish, but knowledge, culture, and ingenuity persist. You realize that resilience is not heroic in the dramatic sense. It is subtle, persistent. You wake to the sound of creaking doors, distant footsteps, and the low murmur of a city teetering between order and chaos. Civilization, you realize, is not a simple story of growth. It is a delicate network of systems, labor, and resources, each dependent on countless unseen connections. Complexity, for all its brilliance, magnifies vulnerability. The more intricate a society, the more fragile it becomes. Take Mesopotamia. Canals, granaries, and city walls allowed the first cities to flourish, but they required constant maintenance. One neglected canal, one mismanaged gate, and suddenly famine threatens. You notice the irony. The very systems that created abundance also create dependency. Civilization is like a clock, beautifully intricate, but if one gear breaks, the entire mechanism falters. Egypt offers a similar lesson. Centralized bureaucracy, monumental construction, and coordinated irrigation allowed a civilization to endure thousands of years. Yet that centralization also created points of failure. If the Nile floods unpredictably, if officials mismanage resources, or if foreign invaders exploit weakness, the entire system strains. Complexity is power, but it is power that can unravel catastrophically when stress accumulates. The Indus Valley demonstrates the subtlety of fragility. Cities designed with precision, drainage systems, reservoirs, and trade networks appear resilient. Yet even a small shift in river patterns or trade disruption can ripple through the urban system. You walk empty streets, imagining the delicate balance required for everyday survival. Civilization's brilliance is in the design, but the design is also a vulnerability. In the Maya lowlands, terraces, reservoirs, and astronomical calculations allow impressive urban centers. But dependence on rainfall, precise maintenance of water systems, and political cohesion make cities fragile. Prolonged droughts or internal conflict strain the network, revealing how complex societies are rarely robust. They are efficient, but efficiency comes with risk. You notice the irony. Clever systems survive under ideal conditions, but crumble when variability intrudes. Rome exemplifies fragility on a massive scale. Roads, aqueducts, and provincial governance allow an empire to stretch across continents. Yet overexpansion, reliance on distant provinces, and bureaucratic complexity magnify every problem. A delayed grain shipment, a corrupt governor, or a military mutiny cascades into crisis. Civilization grows spectacularly, but spectacular growth often comes with spectacular fragility. Daily life across complex societies is a careful balancing act. Farmers, laborers, merchants, and bureaucrats all act as tiny gears in a massive machine. One misstep, neglected canals, miscounted grain, delayed shipments, can ripple outward. You realize that complexity increases productivity and culture, but it also multiplies points of failure. Civilization thrives in stability and falters in disruption. By evening, you sit atop a ruined terrace or aqueduct, watching shadows stretch over abandoned streets, terraces, and canals. You understand a quiet truth: complexity magnifies both achievement and risk. Civilization succeeds spectacularly because of intricate networks of labor, trade, governance, and technology, but those same networks make them exquisitely sensitive to stress. The higher the sophistication, the more catastrophic the potential failure. The irony is persistent. The very systems designed to sustain civilization, canals, granaries, roads, bureaucracy, often accelerate collapse when environmental, social, or political pressures exceed limits. You notice that human ingenuity can postpone fragility. You wake to the subtle scent of earth and water, realizing that civilization is never shaped by humans alone. Environment and society exist in constant dialogue. Rivers, rainfall, soil, and climate interact with labor, governance, culture, and ambition. Every canal dug, terrace built, or granary stocked is a conversation between humans and the world they inhabit. Civilization thrives, or falters, based on how well that conversation is conducted. In Mesopotamia, you notice how the Tigris and Euphrates dictate the rhythm of life. Canals, gates, and dikes reflect human ingenuity, yet the rivers retain ultimate authority. Flood too high, and cities drown. Flood too low, and famine looms. You realize that society's success is inseparable from the environment's cooperation. Human systems amplify opportunity, but they are always subject to nature's whims. Egypt offers a clearer picture of this interplay. The Nile's flood cycles regulate planting and harvest. Priests and officials observe, calculate, and plan. Laborers adjust canals, granaries, and fields. Civilization flourishes when humans anticipate and adapt, but falters when misalignment occurs. You walk along levees and terraces, seeing evidence of both brilliance and vulnerability. The river is a silent partner, generous but indifferent. The Indus Valley exemplifies subtle sophistication. Urban planning, drainage systems, and reservoirs demonstrate long-term environmental management. You observe streets carefully leveled above flood lines and reservoirs ready to capture monsoon rains. Yet when rivers shift or monsoons falter, the same systems that once ensured survival become fragile. Civilization succeeds when adaptation aligns with environmental patterns and struggles when patterns change. In the Maya lowlands, adaptation is intertwined with ritual and observation. Terraces capture rainfall, reservoirs store water, and priests calculate calendars to guide agriculture. You notice that social, cultural, and environmental strategies overlap. Governance, ritual, and engineering all respond to the environment. Civilization is not just surviving, it is negotiating, observing, and responding constantly. But prolonged drought, soil exhaustion, or conflict disrupts this balance, revealing the fragility of human environment systems. Rome demonstrates the interplay on a continental scale. Roads, aqueducts, and provincial administration distribute resources and maintain cohesion. Yet the empire remains vulnerable to climate variability, famine, and social tension. You watch grain shipments delayed, aqueducts silted, and provinces restive. The environment does not strike dramatically, it simply stresses systems already stretched thin. Civilization's complexity amplifies the impact, revealing how society and nature are inseparable actors in history's drama. Daily life across civilizations reflects this negotiation. Farmers adjust planting to rainfall, artisans rely on available resources, administrators balance supply and demand. Every action, from repairing canals to rationing grain, is an environmental interaction. You notice a subtle truth: civilization is never isolated from nature. Success and failure emerge from continuous adaptation, observation, and cooperation with the world around you. By evening, you sit among ruins, canals, terraces, and temples, reflecting on the balance between human ambition and environmental constraint. Civilization rises when society aligns with environmental realities. Collapse often follows when mismanagement, miscalculation, or environmental stress disrupts that alignment. You realize that every achievement, every golden age, and every collapse is a product of this ongoing interplay. The irony is persistent. Humans often build as if nature is obedient. You sit quietly among ruins, canals, terraces, and abandoned streets, realizing that history is less a straight line than a circle. Civilizations rise, flourish, falter, and collapse. Then new ones emerge in their place. Patterns repeat across deserts, rivers, and jungles: opportunity, innovation, golden age, strain, and decline. You notice that this cycle is both relentless and instructive, a rhythm that defines human experience. In Mesopotamia, the first cities rise along rivers, taking advantage of fertile soil and predictable floods. Labor is organized, trade networks expand, and writing captures knowledge for future generations. A golden age emerges, filled with commerce, scholarship, and monumental architecture. Yet environmental stress, invasions, or mismanagement slowly erode stability. The cycle repeats, showing that growth and decline are intertwined. Civilization is never permanent. It is a sequence of attempts, successes, and failures. Egypt follows a similar pattern. Pharaohs consolidate power, construct pyramids, and oversee centralized agriculture. Prosperity flourishes under predictable Nile floods. Yet famine, foreign conquest, or internal corruption gradually destabilizes society. You walk along levees and temples, noting that monuments endure even as dynasties falter. The cycle continues: rise, golden age, strain, collapse, adaptation, and renewal. Civilization persists not as a single achievement, but as a rhythm over time. The Indus Valley illustrates subtle adaptation within this cycle. Cities are meticulously planned, infrastructure is sophisticated, and trade thrives. Monsoons and river patterns dictate the pace of life. Yet shifts in environment, trade disruptions, or social stress slowly unravel urban centers. Civilization adapts, flourishes, and ultimately faces decline, leaving behind artifacts, streets, and canals for you to observe centuries later. The cycle is quiet, gradual, and inevitable. The Maya lowlands demonstrate the interplay of observation, ritual, and environment. Terraces, reservoirs, and astronomical calculations support agriculture and social cohesion. Golden ages emerge, marked by monumental architecture and complex social organization. Droughts, resource scarcity, and internal conflict disrupt the balance, leading to abandonment or collapse. You notice that civilization is a balance between adaptation and vulnerability, and the cycle repeats across generations. Rome, sprawling and ambitious, expands rapidly, consolidates power, and builds infrastructure that spans continents. Trade, law, and military strength create a golden age. Yet overexpansion, climate stress, corruption, and invasions gradually undermine stability. Civilization persists in fragments, roads, aqueducts, and legal systems, while the empire itself falters. The cycle continues: rise, flourish, strain, collapse, and sometimes partial renewal in successor societies. Daily life everywhere reflects this rhythm. Laborers, farmers, artisans, and officials adapt to changing conditions, striving to maintain stability and prosperity. Every canal repaired, crop planted, or granary stocked is part of an ongoing negotiation between ambition, cooperation, and environment. Civilization persists not in permanence, but in the cycle of observation, adaptation, and resilience. By evening, you sit atop a ruined terrace or pyramid, watching shadows stretch over streets and fields. The cycle of civilization becomes clear. Opportunity allows growth, innovation produces golden ages, stress and mismanagement introduce strain, and collapse eventually follows. Yet humans endure, adapt, and rebuild. You sit quietly, imagining the ruins, canals, terraces, and temples of civilizations long gone, and a thought strikes you. History is not just a story of the past, it is a mirror for the present. Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, the Maya, and Rome all rise, flourish, and fall in patterns shaped by climate, resource management, social cohesion, and human ambition. The lessons embedded in those ruins remain, subtle but insistent, warning us of both brilliance and vulnerability. Climate, you notice first, remains the silent arbiter. Rivers, rainfall, droughts, and extreme weather dictated the fates of ancient cities. Today, climate change shapes the global stage in ways just as consequential. You imagine modern cities struggling with heat waves, floods, and resource scarcity. The irony is familiar. Humans build infrastructure, trade networks, and governments to manage life, yet nature always retains ultimate influence. Civilization is still negotiating with an environment that refuses to be tamed. Resource management follows closely. Ancient societies relied on canals, reservoirs, granaries, and trade to survive. Mismanagement could cascade into famine, unrest, and collapse. You think of modern parallels: supply chains, energy grids, and water systems. The lesson is clear. No matter how advanced a society becomes, careful management of resources remains essential. Complexity amplifies success and fragility, just as it did thousands of years ago. Social cohesion is another lesson that resonates. Cooperation allowed monumental projects, trade networks, and centralized governance to function. When trust eroded, societies fractured. You notice similar patterns today: political polarization, social inequality, and competition over scarce resources can destabilize modern civilization. The past whispers a reminder: collaboration and trust are as crucial now as they were in Mesopotamia or Rome. Ambition and overreach remain timeless challenges. Civilizations thrived when human ingenuity aligned with environment and social structures, but faltered when ambition outpaced resilience. You see echoes today in rapid urban expansion, over-reliance on technology, and environmental exploitation. The lesson is subtle but stark. Brilliance alone cannot guarantee sustainability. Civilization requires humility as well as ambition. Daily life, then and now, reflects adaptation. Ancient farmers, artisans, and administrators adjusted to environmental and social pressures. Today, humans still adapt through technology, policy, and innovation, but the stakes are global. You notice the pattern. Survival depends not on perfection, but on persistent observation, careful adjustment, and the ability to respond to stress before it becomes catastrophic. Civilization is a continuous negotiation, not a permanent triumph. By evening, you sit in the quiet of a modern city, imagining shadows stretching over ancient ruins. You realize the continuity of human experience. Ambition, adaptation, cooperation, and vulnerability have always shaped society. The past is not a distant curiosity. It is a blueprint of success and failure, persistence and collapse, brilliance and fragility. You understand that lessons from ancient civilizations are still relevant, if only we choose to pay attention. The irony is persistent. Modern societies often feel invincible, yet patterns from thousands of years ago remain instructive. Climate extremes, resource mismanagement, social unrest, and overambition threaten even the most technologically advanced societies. You notice that civilization is always at risk. Its success contingent on observation, adaptation, and cooperation. The ruins of the past are. You sit quietly among ruins, canals, terraces, and monuments, the wind carrying dust, the faint scent of earth and stone, and the echoes of voices long gone. Civilization, you realize, is not a static achievement. It is an ongoing dialogue between humans and the world around them. Every canal, granary, road, terrace, and temple is part of a conversation with climate, geography, and human society. Success and collapse alike emerge from how that conversation unfolds. In Mesopotamia, the conversation is vivid. Rivers rise and fall, canals flood or dry, cities expand and shrink. Humans respond, adapt, and negotiate constantly. You imagine farmers adjusting irrigation, officials rationing grain, and scribes recording patterns, all to align society with environmental rhythms. Civilization thrives when humans listen to these signals, falters when they ignore them. The lesson is simple, yet persistent. Dialogue is essential, not optional. Egypt demonstrates a subtler, disciplined exchange. The Nile dictates planting and harvest, floods and droughts shape daily life, and humans plan accordingly. Priests, farmers, and bureaucrats all participate in this ongoing negotiation. You notice the irony. Monuments appear permanent, yet the success of everyday life is contingent on constant adjustment and observation. Civilization is both enduring and fragile, built on attentiveness as much as ambition. The Indus Valley offers a quieter reflection. Cities are meticulously planned, drainage systems maintain sanitation, reservoirs capture water, and trade networks flourish. Even so, climate shifts or disruptions slowly unravel systems. You walk empty streets and terraces, realizing that resilience is iterative, incremental, and dependent on feedback. Civilization survives not by resisting change, but by responding to it. In the Maya lowlands, adaptation is intertwined with ritual, observation, and governance. Terraces and reservoirs reflect practical engineering, while calendars and ceremonies reinforce social cohesion and resource management. You notice that human-environment dialogue is both technical and cultural, combining observation with tradition. Yet when droughts extend too long or social tensions rise, the balance falters, revealing that dialogue must be continuous and responsive. Rome exemplifies this dynamic on a continental scale. Roads, aqueducts, and administration allow distant provinces to function, but the empire remains subject to climate, logistics, and social pressures. Grain shipments delay, aqueducts fail, and provinces rebel. Civilization is complex, but complexity amplifies feedback. Failures propagate faster, and resilience requires greater attention, observation, and coordination. Daily life, across all civilizations, reflects this principle. Farmers observe patterns, artisans adjust production, bureaucrats enforce rules, and citizens cooperate. Every action is part of the conversation with the environment and society. Success is temporary, failure inevitable, yet persistence and adaptation allow humanity to continue. Civilization is never static. It is an ongoing negotiation, a dialogue that spans generations. By evening, you sit atop a terrace, observing shadows stretching over ruins, canals, and streets. The conversation becomes clear. Civilization is sustained through observation, adaptation, and cooperation. Collapse is never a single event. It is the result of ignoring feedback, overreaching ambition, or misalignment with environment and society. Human history is full of warning signs, yet humans often learn slowly, persistently, and sometimes painfully. The irony is persistent. Civilizations appear permanent in their monuments and achievements, yet the dialogue with nature and society is continuous. Success emerges from responsiveness, cooperation, and humility, while failure emerges from neglect, mismanagement, and hubris. You notice that civilization's brilliance is inseparable from its vulnerability, a truth